Hi all, and welcome to another show of the Truth, Honour and Integrity. This show this week. Tonight is August the 3rd. Hi all, and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. It feels like it's been 3 weeks this week. This is the third show since Sunday. And whilst I can't promise it'll be as interesting as on what took place on Tuesday, I'll have some background into what took place on Tuesday and what was said, and some of the things that need to be covered after the fallout of that show, and we'll take it from there, see how it goes. Right, first things first, THI would like to send condolences to the Jim Marrs family and all his friends. Jim was quite an epic researcher in many ways, and sadly he passed today, and he was one of the good guys. He didn't get involved in some of the nonsense that we've covered in the alternative media. He just put the stuff out there and gave people an opportunity to learn, and that's the way it should always be. You know, unfortunately, we've been sidetracked by too many clowns in the alternative media, as well as clowns in the cabal. That has to be covered to give people a chance to learn properly. So we thank Jim Marrs for his sterling work, and we wish him well on his journey. Right, where are we first? Right, this is the Truth, Honour and Integrity show, and we'll have no doubt the more regular listeners tonight, and we had a few interesting ones listening in on Tuesday, which is why some aspects of the show was watered down, shall we say. I am more at liberty to say certain things that couldn't be said in that particular show, and I'll be, like I said, I'll be covering some of that later on. So if you want to send questions in for the show and you don't have Facebook or the MeWe, you can send into an email, or if you want to speak to me in private, send an email, truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. Honour is spelt the American way without the U. And the links for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can get all the archives of the THI shows, which started in May of last year. They're all there, including some others that some of the big shows that we've done in the past. The Future of Humanity, the Shane podcast, which goes into depth of the D level, the P level and the C level, as discussed in the show. It had to be done that way. And also the factions. If you've covered those three shows, the Illuminati, Levashov material is an added background into it, and so you will then gain a deeper understanding of who's who and what's what. That's why those shows were done and spaced out, so it gave people an opportunity to understand the control system. As it was stated on Tuesday, most people have no idea of what the control system is or the depth of it, and again I'll cover some of that later. So there's an articles website that covers certain things, Kingdom of Mana being one, and some of the biggest shows are on that site as well, and stuff about technology and a few other things. That's been filled out. It's only just started, so there's not a vast amount of content, but we're adding to it as we go along. And there's some articles of Chloe's on there as well. the grounding, shielding, centering and breathing, and the Saturn Moon Matrix, I think. So that website is thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. And we have the social and Facebook media site that everyone, well, some people love anyway. It's called The Truth, Honour and Integrity. And if you don't like Facebook social media, we have an alternative called MeWe.com. Now apparently we're having difficulty being found on that particular site, so if you send an email to The Truth, Honour and Integrity Gmail, we can then add you to that particular platform. We also have the People's Club donations website link and everything to do with what the People's Club will become, and that's thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into some news. Lots of to and froing, and most of the news tonight I've got is largely American based. Looking through it, yep, pretty much. And there's been some musical chairs going on in Washington, which was forecast, and I can tell you now, it's not the end of it either. And it doesn't matter whether you've just been appointed in the last 6 months or you were part of the old staff. If certain things are not being done right, certain people will be removed. There's no waiting around for 4 years or 8 years, depending on the presidential term. It's you're fired. Of course, Mr. Trump is famous for that statement. So Donald Trump announced last Friday he was appointing a new Homeland Security head by the name of John Kelly to be the White House Chief of Staff, and this ends the rather tumultuous 6-month tenure of Reince Priebus. And after months of speculation about Mr. Priebus's fate, Trump tweeted the decision as he landed in Washington after an event in New York in which he had actually lavishly praised Kelly's performance at the Homeland Security. Now, Priebus was the former Republican National Committee head and was the frequent target of rumours about his job security and the victim of a long whisper campaign by Trump allies and the subject of a remarkable public rebuke this week by the new White House Communications Director. So he was ripe to go, and go he did. Now, I will say now, there's further speculation in the pipeline, so people can watch out for it, is that the US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, may be thinking about stepping down from his job or being told to step down amid reports of mounting conflicts within the Trump White House. And then on Friday, after the new White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci, does anyone else, Mr. Scaramucci, the minute I hear that word, I want to play this.
I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening.
I couldn't help it. I had to play it. It's just Scaramucci, Scaramucci. Anyway, Scaramucci had attacked Mr. Priebus and Chief Strategist Steve Bannon in what was rather vulgar terms in an interview with the New Yorker published the previous day. There was a long and quite raucous effort to replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, or complete waste of money. And that collapsed in the early hours of last Friday when the GOP Senators John Squiddlechops McCain, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska rebelled to sink a pared-down repeal bill Those developments had followed the president's unexpected announcement on Twitter of a ban on transgender people serving in the military, and public criticisms by Trump of his Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who's another lined up to be fired or told to step down. And insiders say Trump is trying to drive Sessions out of office, but without directly firing him. And then on me run again, White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci
I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening.
Sorry, I can't help it. You've got to have a laugh, haven't you? And all these serious things going on. People getting all het up on social media and whatnot. So Mr. Scaramucci, no, I won't play it again. I'm not doing the time warp again. Has been fired after fewer than 10 days in the post. Mr. Priebus at least lasted 6 months. Mr. Scaramucci lasted 10 days. And the former Wall Street financier had drawn criticism after calling a reporter to give a profanity-laced tirade against his colleagues. Trump's chief of staff, or then chief of staff, Reince Priebus, and spokesman Sean Spicer have both left their posts with his appointment. Now, the decision was made by Trump's new chief of staff, General John Kelly, who was sworn in last Monday, and the president was also happy with Mr. Scaramucci's performance, and the White House confirmed Mr. Trump's spokeswoman, Sarah Sanders, said the president thought Mr. Scaramucci's comments to the reporter were inappropriate for a person in that position. Absolutely. It beggars belief how these people who are allegedly appointed by us, but we don't get given much choice, do we? And what we're seeing, to me anyway, in my opinion, is a complete collapse. They're exposing themselves. Their masks are coming down as well. It's not just the cabal, it's the lower levels, and they're coming down, and they're exposing themselves for who they really are. Mr. Scaramucci exposed himself with quite an awful rant that whilst the attack may have been correct, there's certain ways you have to act on behalf of the country, and that's certainly not acting on behalf of the country, the states, or the constituents. It's just not. And the White House and all the politicians need to clean up their act and start working on real things that's going to help the people, and quit with the mudslinging and just appoint proper people to do the job. That's all it needs. It doesn't need fancy titles or used to work for Goldman Sachs and all this rubbish. There's plenty of Americans around the country who just have basic common sense, because that appears to be what we sadly lack in this country: common sense in positions of alleged power. You know, we have a country to rebuild, fix, a people to be built back up and not crushed underfoot by the weight of debt that has nothing to do with us. Crushed underfoot by all kinds of dodgy accounting and banking and trust accounts. All these things have to be fixed, and we won't fix it mudslinging in the corridors of power. So if Mr. Trump's got further people to remove them all in one day, and let's get on with the job of fixing this country and its people. Now, we covered a story last week, a young child by the name of Charlie Gard, a British baby, who had become the subject of quite a bitter dispute between his parents and doctors. Quite why there's a dispute is beyond me. But again, I will do a piece later on, and you'll understand why it actually is a dispute. And the parents wanted to take the child to America for some experimental treatment, but sadly he died on Friday without being given the opportunity. It's just wrong. And this is why we have to get behind people like the Kingdom of Manor and the many other people around the world who are trying to restore our rightful ownership and property of the self and the family. Not pick holes in it because it says king or other stuff. Mother and father can't decide what is right for their children. That's where we're at currently. Except we won't be at that for too much longer. Mr. Trump made a big statement, in my opinion, this week, which was probably overlooked with all the toing and froing, but he chose to end the lavish CIA support. I'll repeat that again. Trump to end the lavish CIA support for moderate anti-Assad forces in Syria. There's your elephant in the room. It always was them. All too convenient to blame people 8,000 miles away. The White House and CIA have reportedly decided to end a covert operation to arm the so-called moderate Syrian rebels. The US has allegedly pumped some $1 billion into training and equipment efforts with questionable outcomes. Well, there's no question about it. Zero outcome. As Mr. Assad is still in office, so it's been wasted money. $1 billion, yet again, of our money, not theirs. And we just tolerate this? So on Wednesday, US officials told the Washington Post and Reuters that Trump has decided to put an end to the covert CIA plan which began arming and training so-called moderate Syrian rebels back in 2013. So there you have your reason why Syria has been ongoing for 4 years. Because our money supplied it. How about $1 billion to train and equip teachers and children? Why are teachers all around the country dipping into their meagre salary to provide crayons and pencils and books for children? But we can go and spend $1 billion on training some moderate Syrian rebels who we've never even heard of to intervene into something that we don't even know what we're intervening in a country that the vast majority of Americans have no idea whether they're good, bad or indifferent, but we just allow $1 billion of our money with no oversight, or all kinds of multi-millions going into the Mujahideen, into Afghanistan. Mr. Bin Laden, you remember? Tim Osman, another CIA operative. Oops. or supplying billions to Saddam Hussein, another CIA operative, until he wouldn't take on Iran. Let's get everyone no more fighting for the purpose. Meanwhile, one country sits in the middle of the Middle East, laughing their heads off, while we, the Americans, do their dirty work with our money. You see the problem? We have a solution, and we need it quick, to be enacted quick. So, kudos to Mr. Trump and his team for ending that sort of nonsense. Now we have to go one step further and end all foreign spending on wars that have nothing to do with the United States of America or its people. There's not a single war on this planet ongoing that is to do with American people. Not one. But we're paying for it, funding 80% of NATO for another illusionary Cold War with Russia. Good luck with that. Oh. We're only half an hour into the show and the first mention of Russia. You know, let's blame Russia. It's their fault. And here we go. Of course, we can't go a week by without some allegation of Russia. And Russia's decided this week to fight back. Hundreds of people who work for the US Inc. in Moscow and other Russian cities, though quite why there's so many of them who are working over there. Well, I think it's fairly obvious they're all spies. But again, why we need that many spies in a country is beyond me. Can't remember the last time Russia attacked America. Did they ever? Anyway, over the weekend, Russia President Vladimir Putin said that the US had to reduce its diplomatic staff in the country by more than 750 people. And this was quite a development in what has become increasingly worsening relations between the US and Russia. Thankfully, there's enough people in both countries who are not prepared to escalate it and are doing their damnedest to reduce the nonsense that's been rhetoric that's been spouted out by the media. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump at times, because he has not too much option to say much different. But rest assured, there's sufficient in both countries to prevent any sort of nonsense or tensions arising. So, they're exposing the tension between the two countries that arises from the new sanctions imposed on Russia and alleged suspicions about meddling in the US election, whilst overlooking that the CIA meddled in 61 elections since the Second World War. Oops. Now, for many, it also raised the question, why are so many people working at the US Embassy in Moscow and in other places? The estimates, there are 1,200 US state employees in that country. The number seems rather high, yet doesn't really make much sense, does it? Although perhaps if they're working in diplomatic efforts, then it'd be worth doubling them. But if they're working as spies, it's time to bring those people home. I'd like to see it outlawed altogether, spying. It's such a waste of, yet again, our money. Wells Fargo again. Wells the Fargo. Are they talking about? Now, apparently, there's a lot of people angry over the latest. This is a new one. It may seem similar because Wells Fargo have been accused of numerous scandals and corruption and fraud. And here's another one that happened in the past 7 days. Hundreds of thousands of bank customers were overcharged by Wells Fargo. Go figure. Now, Wells Fargo shares fell near 3% on Friday after the New York Times first reported the news, and the stock closed 1.2% higher Monday, but it's still down. Now, the article cited a 60-page internal report which revealed more than 800,000 of Wells Fargo's auto loan customers were charged for a car insurance they did not need. They had to pay a lot of people out in the UK for this as well. Wells Fargo estimated the mistaken auto insurance sales, I love the way these downplay it, it was just a mistake, would cost the bank $80 million in damages. I hope that doesn't come out of the people's accounts and it comes out of the CEO's pocket, all of it. Piper Jaffray, sounds like Heather Jaffray, said the true cost is likely understated, and we believe the full cost may be significantly higher than 80 million and weigh on the risk premium the market will place on shares. And so it's a case of here we go again with Wells Fargo. Will it ever end? They're one of the clowns I was referring to on Tuesday about banking and economy stupidity. You wouldn't believe what their top CEO asked for. Anyway, here's some other clowns and some people clearly not based in reality. Federal Reserve officials. Dear me. I don't even want to read this. It's that stupid. Well, there we go. The Federal Reserve officials say the US economy is at or very close to full employment. Pull the other one. It's got bells on. You idiots. 102 million out of work, but we're close to full employment. Really? Oh well. The thousands of American workers this week who lined up in the searing heat in Arizona, I think it was, I may be wrong on that, after Amazon said it was hiring 50,000 workers for their fairly low-paying, physically demanding jobs in high-pressure warehouses, suggests that the Federal Reserve is basically talking through its asshole. You know, Mr. Trump removed them people, all of them. Full employment, my ass. It just defies belief. It really, it's beyond all comprehension. Full employment. For those that don't know, and those that follow the bullshit media figures, there's 102 million American workers out of work. That is nearly 50% of the adult workforce. There's 146 million, which is not far short of the total of half of the total American population, on benefits. The clowns at the Fed think, whoa, we're in full employment. Yeah. Where are we for time? Doing okay. Right, this is, we've had enough of bullshittery and scams and toing and froing and musical chairs at political appointees. Here's something that is gonna, we'll probably have a music break after this. That's gonna lift you. How people, and we've covered this many times, spend too much of their life creating limitations. I can't do this, I can't do that. Or I haven't got this and I haven't got that. An 8-year-old girl called Roxy Getter has just become the youngest girl to conquer Mount Kilimanjaro. 8. I can't believe she did it, said her father, Bobby Getter, speaking to the Inside Edition this week. She didn't stop, she didn't complain. I was surprised, but very happy for her. Now, Roxy and her family, including also a 10-year-old brother from Punta Gorda in Florida, tackled the 19,341-foot mountain earlier this month during a family vacation to Tanzania. Now, the mother explains both Roxy and Ben have a history of heart issues, but were cleared to trek up the mountain by a cardiologist before they left. The family, who had never done an overnight camping trip before, ended up spending nearly a week on the mountain. Still think you can't do anything? Still think you're limited? Think again. It's only your own limitations that's stopping you doing anything. I've covered this in the shows. It's just nice to see kids, of course, have less fear than us, and that's part of the problem. Overcoming the fear of we're not good enough, low self-esteem. I'm only little me, I can't do this, I can't do that. No, you can do anything you put your mind to and believe in. Those kids believed they could do it. The parents were the ones that were surprised. Older and more fear. So kudos to those two kids. Unfortunately, for the brother, who's 10, is kind of got overlooked because his sister was 2 years younger. But it's a massive achievement, and I think should be applauded and give you all strength to carry on and move forward, no matter what you're doing in life. Right, we're going to have a musical break, and one of our members is having an operation, so may not be listening in tonight, called Chris Whalen. So good luck with the hip operation, Chris, and all our members wish you well. And here's a song for Chris. Hi all and welcome back. First song was for Chris Whalen, who's having a hip hop. So keep doing the heavy shake, Chris, and we'll be alright. Right, let's go on to the next portion. Now this is there's no intel this week. A lot of the intel's already coming out. It's coming out quicker now than it used to. Sometimes we have things ahead of time in the show, and we still do. But Tuesday's show was intel in itself, on volumes of it. Now, first things first, I'm going to be covering a whole heap of things to do with Tuesday's show, and some comment on it also. Now, the first thing I've got to say, or cover, is at the opening of the show I gave a little piece, like a forerunner to the show, and the choice was made not to out the name of the person who was speaking for safety reasons. Now, the lady in question mentioned about contracts and certain rogue elements firing shots and doing abduction attempts and a whole heap of other skullduggery. She was one of them. So when people start asking me about to out the name, I get rather pissy, because that is not the way forward. It's just not. What we're doing here is the most extraordinary thing in the whole of history for 16,500 years. That's what you've got to get a grasp of. The whole of humanity has been under a control system of staggering proportions. Only maybe 60% of it has been disseminated on the internet. That's if you are able to package it all together, because there's bits here and bits there. And it took a brave few, and it was the few to begin with, to decide to take the behemoth on. Like the little girl I said before the music. She believed she could do it. And if you believe sufficient in anything, you can overcome anything. They did so, knowing that their lives would change from that day forward. They would have a target on their back, front, face, head, everything. Because these people, or certainly the ones at the top, the psychopaths, have no value for human life whatsoever. So there's the times when openness and safety don't go together. But we heard about a whole raft of information, how the control system works, or should I say worked. The stealing of your souls, property and name, and a whole host of other revealings. And people, despite all that, want or demand to know that particular lady's name. Is that really the thinking level we're at? Because if it is, we're in trouble. And I'm aware of trust issues. Pardon the pun. We've seen enough of the skullduggery on the internet. I went into these people far deeper than some of the others, because as their, in essence, spokesperson via the radio show, I'm responsible for everything I've ever asked for from the group. I've been given, be it documents, solid proof, some of which I can guarantee some of those who we think are at the top level have never even seen. But put yourself in that person's shoes who was on Tuesday. If you had the courage to come forward, would you want your name put out and with more bullets targeted at your head? If that was your daughter, would you like me out in that person's name? Sure you wouldn't. Now, some people have questioned the information, and again, criticism with me is fine. That's what, I'm not holding other people accountable and not myself. I'm accountable as same as everybody else. And I've always been fine with criticism as long as it's done in a polite and considered manner, where you may be questioning things, which is fine, as long as it has a purpose to understanding and not coming from the aspect of just picking faults, because then you're coming in with a predetermined agenda. Now, one thing, all of you who listen to this show knows that this show is more open for information than most of the others that you'll listen to. We are open. We are accountable. Well, I am. You hear intel and info on this show long before others do, in some aspects. We don't know it all. We don't portray to know it all. But some of the finer details are kind of exclusive to this show only. So we are more open than others. So when it comes to hiding certain details or covering certain details, there's obviously a large apparent reason for doing so. Because if knowing the name of that person is the most important thing, then you're really off track. You're nearly not considering the damage that causes. What if some of the all the names who have been doing so much behind the scenes at great risk to their lives, and they all get killed? What have we got left? I'll tell you what we've got left. Nothing. Because then they will have all the accounts to carry out their programs of destruction on this planet and its people. This is what we're facing and taking on. And I need people to be a bit more aware of what they're asking and what they're saying going forward. Now, the show itself has pushed the boundaries of disclosure, and yet we still find certain people are looking for faults rather than the positive aspects. And this largely plays in, I mentioned in the previous hour, of low self-worth, low self-esteem, insecurity issues. But the reality is, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, you'll remember the first person who mentioned it, so I'm going to give him credit for saying it, Shane Laroona. Humanity has won. It's already won, but it's forgotten how to claim the win. We actually won on January the 1st, 2013. And yes, they are playing fun and games with 4-year loops, but we still won. But if I say I can't out a name or a piece of info, you can guarantee 1000% it's for a valid reason and no reason to hide, because like I said, this show's more open and more accountable than any other show. Lots of other shows do some fantastic research work, but there's no accountability, there's no comeback. This show, people can ask questions on things that I've said last week, the week before, the month before, or even 2 years ago, and I'll always answer. This show is never hidden from anything or anyone, and we're not about to do it now. You know, we have, like I said, we have questions each week. In fact, I have questions each day and night, funny enough, with some of the members, which I don't mind most of the time. You know, so we are accountable, or I am accountable for what I've said. I'm always available to answer questions if people don't understand certain aspects, and it's okay to not understand and grasp some of the stuff, particularly to do with the Tuesday show, because it's so far out of our learning curve. Then that's okay. But don't go in on yourself and start attacking it because you can't understand it. Ask the questions. That's what we're here for. You know, so sometimes I'll state whether it's just an opinion, sometimes I'll state it's a theory, or a rumour, and other times I'll say, this is what I know. And sometimes we have a problem with humanity. And Chloe and I were discussing this before, and she had some input in on this. The problem is the programming. Although it shouldn't be used as a full excuse, as a crutch to lean on. Each of us has experienced different levels of programming. So we get to a point where someone mentions, for example, X, Y, and Z as being wrong. They're not allowing for X, Y, and Z to be corrected or changed, or the fact nothing or no one is totally dark or totally light either. Info, people, organisations can all change with different people owning or standing in. If the cabal can denigrate lots of the old institutions, the mystery schools, the original Freemasons, into what it is today, a raft of black magic, cultism, occult, and total bullshittery, then can't we put our people in there who operate in a better manner than them and turn it back to the way it was? The United Nations is another example. with better people in the United Nations and a better way forward for humanity, cannot that not be changed? In fact, both United Nations, because therein lies the problem. Most people are only aware of one, when there's two. But the part of the problem we're having is too many people, both in the sleepers and the awake community, I have to say it, are too rigid in their beliefs or ideals because of the programming. That change is almost impossible, even when it's right in front of your face. Well, it's time we lightened up. I mentioned the term maybe 12, 18 months ago about the truth bubble. If you don't keep expanding it, then you're limiting your knowledge base. If you don't keep expanding to all possibilities, all you get is limitations. As you go through successive evolutionary planes on the soul development, you open certain doors because you've reached certain planes. If you're going to keep shutting them doors, you're not going to go forward. If all the people on this planet keep shutting the doors, we're not going forward. So it's a time for those who feel they may be stuck to lighten up. Make yourself open to all possibilities and not dismiss everything to a point where you'll actually miss things, as life will inevitably pass you by. Some say there's no change. That to me is absurd. There's actually been enormous change if only you open yourself and allow yourself to see it. And yes, I'm aware we've been let down. Failed promises, 2 weeks and all that fun. Absolutely, I'm aware of all that. And until the foundation starts, myself will always be under doubt by some as to my input or requests on that front. And as it stands, it weighs rather heavily on me because I am personally responsible. Do I think it will happen? Absolutely. Heard enough on Tuesday. There are valid reasons as to why. We also heard on Tuesday that things are closer than we think. Now, a few things that people complained of was actually answered in the show, which is kind of why I am a bit agitated with some of the comments. The question was asked about the terms kings. Again, it's to do with programming, thinking kings ruling over the people. But what if you get a king in place that has no need or want to rule over the people? You're forgetting the human element here. The idea is not new boss same as the old boss. It's to replace their system which failed. So why would we want to bring in new kings to rule over people. When we're talking about a dramatic change, the most dramatic change in human history, you're not making sense. We don't want kings ruling us. Hello? How many times have I said that on the show? It wouldn't matter to me tomorrow if I was appointed King of America. Would I change? No. It's about self-empowering. I'm all about self-empowering the people, not the one. So just because you see a term kings, step out of the programme. They understand those titles. What we understand is, or need to understand is, those titles don't matter if it's being operated for and by the people. You can call people by whatever title you like, but they're not operating for and by the people, then it's a complete waste of time. And these people intend to operate for and by the people. This is why they've put their lives on the line. There's a mention of they're religious. No, they're not. There's no mention of religion. Just because you quote one verse out of the Bible doesn't mean you're religious. Again, you clearly haven't listened to the show. Somebody else said there's no such island. I suppose it's called the Manus. M-A-N-U-S. Not Kingdom of Manor, that's the name of the trust and the group. Again, a little bit of effort instead of looking for faults. And if someone complained about the buildings on the island, they didn't like them. It's a case of you can't please all of the people all of the time. Would I like life 100% nature? Personally, no. I like some technology. I like a mixture of both. There are other people who like all technology. That's what makes the human element. Unless we all want to be synthetics and act like walking clones and robots, following orders for the rest of our days. Flexibility has to be a key word going forward. Flexibility of the self and flexibility towards others. Otherwise this charade will just roll on and on until all the families that was mentioned in the show and the cabal have died and no one will have noticed. It's only we who are carrying on the slave system and ultimately the control system through our own thoughts and our own actions. It was explained in depth, not only on Tuesday, but in successive shows, how they have collapsed to the point of nothing. But if we keep believing that they're in control, they're never going to go away. So we need to start thinking and acting in a different way. We started the first THI show stating that. Thinking in the old way is what got us into the control system to begin with. You have to think in a different way to step outside of it and its matrix and its AI bullshittery and operate our way. With new ideas, new thoughts, new ways of being, new ways of living, new ways of looking after each other instead of divide and conquer. That's our way forward. But unless you're prepared to put the effort, the thoughts and the actions into that, then in essence the slave system's gone and you are carrying on with the illusion of being a slave. Now, one of the things I need to mention is the role of the council in this. And some people have said, why haven't they done this and why haven't they done that? And at times I say the same thing. But there's one thing the Kingdom of Mana people can't do, is violence. We cannot implement violence. Because that's the quickest way you end your sovereignty. Because in the new way forward, a sovereign is only allowed to defend, not attack. So once America becomes sovereign, all these wars that the clowns are pushing forward around the world have to stop. And the people have to make them stop. Otherwise we go back to the same system, outside of sovereign and back into slavery. So the council only intervenes when it's something outside of our control, human control, that we can't deal with. That's why the remnants of the Draco family were swept up in November of last year. The council chose to intervene. What is left now, largely, despite some claims on the internet, is human versus human. They will not intervene on that. It's up to us to intervene. We don't like what another human's doing to us or perpetrating. It's up to us to say, we don't want it. We're not compliant with your bogus laws and rules and regulations and all that bullshittery. No. Now, a lot of that system, once America is declared sovereign, will collapse anyway. But collapsing it is one thing. But if people don't change the way they think and act, we've kind of wasted our time. And this is what the shows have been all about, is preparing you for that time. We knew it was coming. Now, one of the things that was covered, and I've said repeatedly in the shows, about the relevance of Mr. Trump, or anyone else, politician for that matter. Well, Tuesday's show blew that out of the water, because the general politicians are not even on the list of the control system. They're that far down, innit? 6 pages that are 2 or 3 foot long of names and most of you would only recognise the bottom 4 inches on the 6th page. And none of them are called Trump or Obama, although he's been added to it now with his idiocy, playing Pindar. Politicians' level is no better than ours. They have no power. They have no control. They have nothing. They just play an illusion game. They're not even politicians, if the truth be known, because we had no American government since 1861 or 71. The CEOs of a corporation, all of them, including Trump, or Obama, or Bush, or Clinton, CEOs of a corporation. And so I hope people grasp that where the levels of politicians are, because they're not important. They never were. They're not important to the cabal, never mind anyone else. A bunch of frightened men and women who are threatened into playing the role and the illusion of power. And yes, they get well compensated. They also get abused and tortured and other things, as we have found out in previous shows. So the reality is, the politics game is not really worthy of our energy or time in vast volumes. What is worthy is how we get out of this mess on a personal level. Politicians will come and go. You've seen that recently. But we have to provide them with a decent platform to perform to them, allow them to perform the way we want them to. Because we've kind of forgotten they are supposed to be working for and by the people. And I can't think of a single one who can honestly 100% say that's what they're doing in the White House. Not one. Now the other thing that came up was mentioned. It was called the Social Security Insurance. You may not like this next part, but again, it's the reality of what has been stolen off the people. The Social Security Fund is the trust. So everything for disability or ill health or old age is already there. And yet we get paid to ask. We got paid, asked to pay into a social security fund, which is now classed as a benefit, funny enough. Every cent you've given to the social security is money to the Crown and Rome. Like the income tax. Every cent. Because the Social Security insurance was already in the World Trust. Already paid for. How one would think that was more important to find out and put an end to than finding out who the lady's name was. We heard about soul stealing, how they overtook your property. I'm going to read something out that's part of the small part that has been sent. And it was covered in the Seswi KV Trust part. But here's a deeper element to it. So what is the Seswi KV Trust and why does it matter? Well, in 1666 in London, during a pre-planned Black Plague and the Great Fires of London, they burnt the whole of London down. 1666. The Parliament then enacted an act behind closed doors called the Seswi KV Act of 1666. Now the act was brought into being to covertly subrogate the rights of all men and women and prevent anyone from challenging the king or any heirs to the throne by claiming to be a monarch, which is a sovereign citizen. So false flags have been going a lot longer than 9/11 or Gulf of Tonkin or Pearl Harbor. They've been pulling false flags right throughout history. Of course, like 9/11, we got thrown with the Patriot Act. Great Fires of London. They stole our sovereignty. Now, a year later, in 1667, was the beginning of the bloodline of the current reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. And in the time period post the Seswi KV Act of 1666, anybody who did claim to be a monarch, sovereign citizen, with common law rights was killed for treason. That's your Vatican friends again, along with the Crown Corporation. After a few hundred years, very few, if any, were questioning or searching for a way to be free of slavery and the fraudulently altered system and orders from the top, because if they did, they were killed. The Seswi KV Trust, also known as the Foreign Sitters Trust and also known as a form of secret trust, is a fictional concept, being a temporary testamentary trust which was first created during the reign of Henry VIII of England through the Seswi KV Act of 1540 and updated by Charles II through the Seswi Act of 1666, wherein an estate may be effected for the benefit of one or more persons presumed lost or abandoned at sea, CEA, Holy See, maritime law, and therefore presumed dead after 7 years. Additional presumptions by which such a trust may be formed were added in later statutes to include bankrupts, minors, children, incompetents, in other words, they just declared you insane or unsane under the Mental Health Act, and claimed your estate. Mortgages, go figure, and private companies, all added to their benefit. So the original purpose and function of the SESKV Trust was to form a temporary estate for the benefit of another because some event, state of affairs or condition prevented them from claiming their status as living beings and sovereign citizens with authority of their being and their own estate. So that's what we're taking on. That is what we're bringing down. And I may cover some more of this, certain Emergency Powers Act. The Patriot Act was also part of the SESWKV Estate Trust. Emergency Relief and Construction Act of 1931-32 and Emergency Powers Act 1861. The Act for Settlement of Ireland 1651-52 was introduced the concept of settlements, enemies of the state and restrictions of movement in states of emergency. All Americans were declared enemies of the state in 1917, 1918. So we're all terrorists, you see. The Bank of International Settlements are the ones that was created in 1931 for the control of claimed property of associated private central banks around the world. Upon deliberate bankruptcy of most countries, private central banks were installed as administrators, and the global SESWKV Foreign Citizens Trust system was implemented from 1933 onwards. From 1933, a baby is born in a state under inferior Roman law. 3 SESWKV trusts are created upon certain presumptions, again, there's that word again, specifically designed to deny the child forever any rights as a human being by claiming and possessing their life force energy. I'll repeat that again. It's important people grasp it. From 1933, when a baby is born in a state under inferior Roman law, 3 SESWKV trusts are created upon certain presumptions specifically designed to deny the child forever any rights as a human being by claiming and possessing their life force energy, i.e. soul, and through deceptive, fraudulent language and paperwork. Now I'll probably go into, in another show, the 3 trusts and how they came to be and the different laws. It's not just a Roman cult either. There's a Talmudic cult that's part of the SESWKV Trust. Beggars belief. Right, where are we going to next? Of course, recently there's been Miss Manor, as we called her, mentioned about Heather Giraffe and her subsequent arrest for basically trying to defraud the American government. And here's why. In 1921, the deceptive corporate, because of the Federal Reserve, Congress abdicated its duty to control the money and turned it over to the Holy See's SEE, Federal Reserve System, to be the fiscal agent of the United States Treasury, which promptly ceased to exist in 1924. The Federal Reserve took over the United States Treasury, and the United States Treasury no longer exists from 1924. And what happened then? They took vast amounts of American wealth with it, including government money. But that didn't stop the Holy See and the Crown agents from pretending that the United States Treasury still existed when it doesn't. What they did was just rename their own shill companies after it. The United States Treasury, the Treasury of the United States, the United States Treasury Department, the US Treasury, and the Department of the Treasury. Confused? You bet. What's that? 6 or 7 different companies, all operating and pretending to be the United States Treasury, which the clowns at Congress and the Federal Reserve and the Vatican closed in 1924. Where are we next? So, now you understand on a slightly simplified level of what's been going on here. The other levels, now most of our regular listeners will know what Miss Manor was referring to of Group D and Group P and Group C. For those of you who have forgotten or don't know, the top layer of the control system, Group D, was the Draco. Whether you like that idea or not, it's fact. Not the reptilian, but the very similar lizard people. Warmongers, no compassion, no empathy, greedy, and at times completely psychopathic. Sound familiar, Cabal? Should be. And then there was a previous or a different version of human that was put in control here. They were a lot taller than us, called the parents, because they were parenting us. Not that we asked for it, like, but the Draco were lied to by 2 other groups, the Abraxans and the Aldazani. Most of you will not be familiar with those 2 terms or names for a reason. See how things always get hidden and they push forward others to take the blame, like Obama, like Trump for that matter. Trump's fault that America's going to the wall. No, it's not. It's the people's fault for allowing those people to control it for that long. Again, some people won't like that idea, but it's the truth. So the parents who were a lot taller than us and had retained more memory, more abilities, with a second layer down, Group P. Group C is what's known as the Covens. They didn't know what the parents were doing, and the parents didn't know what the Draco were doing. Compartmentalization on a massive scale. So the Covens are the ones that involve the dark or black magic. Where they distorted some of the ancient mystery schools. Because there is white magic. It's not as powerful as the black magic, mind you. And black magic is enhanced even more if it mixes with white magic, as covered in a previous show. The voodoo. So the Covens are the ones that have more interaction with the people and play fun and games with Brandon and occultism and cultism, and influencing certain things on the planet using dark magic largely. And then the next layer down was the Illuminati. It is no more. What we've got now was described in full detail in a previous show I did in November of 2015. I think a lot of members are glad I did that show now, because now they're understanding more of it as time goes on. Into 5/6 factions who are currently on the verge of collapse. All of them. Why? Because these people are even less important than the Covens, and less important than the parents. And the Draco classed them as out and out slaves. So all your families that reside in that group, they were classed as slaves by the Draco. They're all finding that out now. They thought they were so important, carrying out the orders from above. Yeah, they'll give them fancy titles, give them the illusion of importance. Some wealth, throw a bit of other nonsense in that people get up to, and away you go. Just follow the orders, read the script, do this, do that. Nice little sheep. Just basically that's what the families and the Illuminati members were. Sheep for the higher order. Now all those sheep just followed. They're not leaders, they're followers. They're only leaders by the illusion of the titles. But they had no say either. And then they control the next layer down, which is the politicians and the corporations, etc., etc. Who also think they're more important than we the people. But they're even less slaves than the level above. And then you get to the militaries. Was it Kissinger who made the statement, the US military are just our slaves? Oh boy. And Kissinger's one of the lower ones in the control system, believe it or not. And yet they still take orders, though largely they're not. anymore. They still took orders from these clowns. Even when ridiculed on a level to be called a slave. It's quite a slap to the ego. These people with all these fancy badges on the shoulders. I'm General this and Lieutenant that. And all the other stuff. To just be told, actually, you know what? You're just a slave. Oh boy, has that slapped their ego. And slowly but surely, the Kingdom of Mana people have been chipping away, getting them to drop their ego and see reality for what it really is. A failed project. Draco knew they would fail. They knew full well. So when the bulk of them left in the summer of 2015, they lost the system because none of them knew how the system worked. Only the M guy, who controlled all the finance, knew how the finance banking system worked. Not the public level. That's part of the illusion again, like markets. The real banking is all behind the scenes on black screens with certain coloured books. I've seen the real book. It's one of the first things I was shown. There's all kinds of people on the internet telling you it's this coloured book and it's that coloured book. It's not actually. It's a bit like the bogus coloured dragons. Funny enough, it's the same guy who told us he had this particular coloured book. That was bullshit. But there you go. I digress. So, what the Kingdom of Mana set out with was almost mission impossible. But certain things took place behind the scenes on a massive scale that very little of which has been released yet. They mentioned there's 2 million people on board. It's an awful lot more who are not following orders either. That is a massive change. Getting people who have done a certain thing, a certain way all their lives, to change to a new way. So we've now got 144 nations, which is 2/3 of all the nations on the planet, actively or considering not only establishing their own sovereignty on a par with the Kingdom of Mana, Kingdom of Mana doesn't have to put any other country on a par, because they are the main sovereign. But they have no intentions of ruling. So why would a main ruler want to give the same status to all the other countries? Because we're going to equalise everything out. Little island of Fiji, or the little island of Manus, or Puerto Rico, or some obscure island in the South Atlantic that most of us have never even heard of, all have the same power and authority and vote and sovereignty as the United States, or China, or Russia, or Britain. Where they can run their own country autonomously, not like Puerto Rico at the behest of Washington or District of Columbia, let's call it by the right name, via Crown Corporation in London and Vatican in Rome. Puerto Rico, if they go sovereign, will control its own funds, its own assets, and not have it leached like we have. So most of those 144 nations are also talking about establishing an embassy, Kingdom of Mana embassy on their soil, where we then have an opportunity to teach them a better way. How to move forward, how to engage with the rest of the world, or in some cases, disengage. The island of Guam or Hawaii no longer has to come under the control of the District of Columbia either. Those people can have their own sovereignty to be able to run their island how they see fit, and not as some sort of drug running exercise like it is now, with a military naval base, so it's easier to attack China, Japan or Korea or anyone else in Asia, because that's the only reason Hawaii is American. War purposes again. Forgetting, what about the people? Did they want American military all over their soil? Testing weapons and all kinds? No. So I hope people really, with the explanation over the last hour or so, get a grasp of the enormity of what's going on here and what is currently taking place, and some of the things that have already been done. $16,500 years of control decimated in under a decade. By a relatively few humans whom certain entities outside of here think we're retarded. Wrong again. Like the little girl who climbed Kilimanjaro, she believed she could do it. We have to start believing we can do it. Believing we are the change. If you're looking for saviours, look for yourself. Because each and every human being, living soul on this planet is the saviour, is the Neo. Not one. And given how close certain things appear, perhaps time would be better spent getting your thinking caps on how to create jobs, not just for yourself, but for others also. That trust fund doesn't belong to the Kingdom of Mana. They are holding it for the people. If the people come up with sufficient ideas that's beneficial to the people and to the planet, those funds will be released. Do you want to stay in your current job? Or are you going to use your brain for a better purpose and think of, what would I like to do? Do you want to spend the rest of life delivering mail for the Royal Mail? Or putting trash cans out? Or do you want to do something that's more suitable to you? Some of you like farming. Personally, I don't. Gardening. I always I always joke you have to be of a certain age to start gardening. I think there's a lot of men who get to a certain age and think, oh, I'll start gardening. Maybe I'm too young at heart. But everyone plays a role. Maybe the likes of Willow, who was on last Sunday, would like to become some sort of a shaman. One that does it in the right way. Because the reality is there's not a single shaman on North American or South American soil. Not one. It's the illusion. You don't become a shaman in 12 months. That's playing at it. The real shamans are the ones that are the driving force behind the Kingdom of Mana. The ones that ended the Draco system, control, the treaty. Very close now to completing all the signings of that treaty. As it's described, it's not easy. It has to be hand-delivered. And some of them are in the middle of nowhere, with no transport. And so people have to trek through jungles and swamps and all kinds of other things to get those people to sign off on it. But there's very few left to sign off now. And then the ceremony begins, and then ends the Draco. And all their bogus treaties and agreements and off-world trading. And then we have a chance to think, what are we going to do with our life? We have to show them we can be the change. Once we organise and show them, the remaining psychopaths, in my opinion, will step down because they have no purpose anymore. Some of them took on roles to control us because we are incapable, or shown we've been incapable of looking after ourselves. Let's show them that this generation and this time they're wrong. Because we can, and we have, and we will. But we have to do it in a certain way, with a lot of flexibility. And this song kind of explains it. Hi all, and welcome to the final part of tonight's show. I'm going to go into some questions now, I think. But I hope that the last hour or so brought some clarity on out any doubts people had of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the severity that the people on the front line face in their lives on a daily basis. You all go to bed, go to sleep. Sometimes you see the astral beings but you're not going to bed worrying whether someone is going to abduct you and take you out. Big difference. And so all the people, not just Miss Manor, who are trying their damnedest to totally end this control system, anything you want to pray to or for, they're the people. Because they're the ones who believed. Right, let's get into some questions. I think there's some on Tuesday's show in that as well. Where are we first? The Zionists apparently have something called the Samson option, which means that if the state of Israel is attacked by another country, they can use their nuclear weapons against all of the world. They may have done. I don't think that's the case anymore. I'm kind of the belief that the nuclear weapons were switched off a long time ago. As far back as the incident in Montana, 1967. It's called Stromset, the base, something like that anyway. When a craft came over and turned all the silos off. So then they put them all back on, which takes a bit of time, and then they came back and turned them all off again. So I don't believe they can fire nuclear weapons. That's why there was the big issue over the Kursk, the Russian sub that was deliberately torpedoed to go down, because there was 4 nuclear weapons on the Kursk. So all the ground-based ones were all negated. Of course, they used one of those Kursk weapons for Japan, and the search has been on to find the rest, including one that was moved from Texas across the country and was intercepted 12-18 months ago. They were going to detonate off the coast of South Carolina. But like all their other plans, it failed. And the second question, are the nuclear weapons able to be used against the world, or are they possibly neutralised by the UPU? That as far as I'm concerned, they've been neutralised a long time ago. The problem was the other weaponry. They've got far more exotic weaponry than nuclear, and a lot of that, the plasma style weaponry, has also been negated. Of course, they've also got the problem now that if they do set off, and they had the capability, which I don't believe they do, that they can't set it off and escape. But that got cut off as well. As of January the 1st, 2017, there is no escape route. So any mess they create, they're in it whether they like it or not. During the Kingdom of Mana show, I noticed instances where powerful women have sold out humanity. I don't know why I find this so disturbing, because for the most part I don't trust women, and I am a woman. I realise that I've been indoctrinated into believing that women are downtrodden in society and are innocent victims and should always get special consideration. We raise them to believe that they can be a princess and to use their anatomy to gain special treatment. We're also conditioned to believe that men are expendable and they're responsible for all the ill wills in the world. You've mentioned before about the feminisation of society. Could you speak this in more detail? Well, this is a kind of difficult subject because it can end up in divide and conquer realm. But the facts, as I know it, should be stated. We can't hide behind race cards and all kinds of other fun and games cards that have been used to stifle dissent or people questioning anything. Now the reality is 9 of the last 10 parents were female. A lot of the drive behind the Draco, yes, there's always the mention of Anu and others, but there's female Dracos that were pulling the strings also. Then of course you go into the old myths. Lilith, moon goddess, not good. A lot of the underground people, known as the underworld. Yes, there was some men in that. There's also some women who were far more powerful, who ruled the roost. Now recently, what was being classed as the end of times, which is now, have you not noticed how many females are in power? Of course, we nearly had another plastic version in America. It's not a coincidence. The idea that we're living in a matriarchal society is a false one. Sorry, a patriarchal society is a false one. We have been living in a matriarchal society. You could go back again in history with Helen of Troy and Cleopatra and a whole heap of others. They were just as warmongering as the men. Then you go back into some of the myths again, where the females, human females, started mating with off-worlders and decided they didn't need human anymore and took part in a ritual to wipe men off the planet because they preferred the gods. Again, that's mythology, but there's always elements of truth in all these mythologies and myths. It's been passed down through the ages. Now, as for the changes, is not about transferring the power of the matriarchal system which we've been in to a patriarchal. That's not going to work either. There has to be a balance of both. A lot of females have had their morals, particularly in the Western world, completely decimated over the last 30 to 40 years. All the treasured aspects of the female eroded away with a plethora of drinking, drug culture, violence, bad language. Not something that was normally associated with the female. The female was the mother, the one who looked after the children. And I'm seeing you go into any town centre, I'll mention England because I'm more familiar with going to the town centres in England, and most of the ones that are out are the mothers. And you wonder why the children have lost their way. The mother is the bond. We as men don't have that same bond. We didn't deliver it. And yet you see so many mothers nowadays leaving the kids with anyone so they can get off on vacations and have a good time and get drunk and drugged and do whatever else they get up to. Female, because of certain role models, and I tend to blame Madonna and the Spice Girls. Girl power. It's not a good image. It's not representative of the empathic, compassion mother being. All a lot of the young girls over the last 30 to 40 years have done is replicate the worst behaviour of males. That's not balance. That's a role reversal of the two peoples, the two sexes. You see a lot of young lads now, they're a lot quieter than my time even. The lads are a lot more rowdy. They're quieter because they're frightened. The young females terrify young lads. That has to change. Of course, the males have been hammered as well with the gender-bending chemicals that were put in the baby food and formulas. A famous company in the UK called Mothercare was caught for that, but it still continues. Now, is it good that a lot of men are suddenly in touch with their feminine side? Absolutely. One of the beneficial aspects, the hidden beneficial aspects of THI is that some men in the group have chosen to put their trust in me and discuss their intimate details. That's something most men don't do, because society works against men discussing intimate details. It kind of dictates that we have to go around bragging we've slept with X number of girls like that's some sort of a trophy. Not really. It's an abandonment of love and abuse. Notches on the bedpost. Is that the way men should be classed as a hierarchy on? No. I used to get laughed at when I was in my late 30s, and there was a discussion going on about men that were in my group, and they were all totting up how many women they'd slept with, and then he came to me and I said 1, and they all laughed. Like it's a source of amusement, but the laugh was on them. I could have bragged and gone along with it, being one of the lads, and said 50. But it's not true, is it? It's about stepping outside of that peer pressure control system and being honest. I was happy at the time with the 1. But pressure and marketing and programming dictates otherwise. Again, it's competing, isn't it? I've slept with more girls than you, so I must be a better man than you. Not really. Left yourself open to more disease. But you carry on. So, the female is the more dangerous of the two sexes. Men are openly angry. And you can easily tell when men are upset. They generally want to threaten to punch somebody, or worse. Where women are a lot more cunning. And again, there needs to be a balance on both sides. Recognise we've all been played for fools, we've all been hammered with programming, and we all have a personal responsibility to correct the way it's gone. And that's why I keep focusing on mentioning about the competition. Because now it's girls comparing how many lads they've slept with. You know, there was a derogatory term 40, 50 years ago. Women were called sluts and tramps and whatever. Now they're bragging about how many they've slept with. That's not the way we would like to see women be. It's not something you should be proud of displaying, that a culture that's created that environment, because it just makes us look bad. So the gist of it is the person who asked the question, you're right. Because most of the control structure, in fact, there's two parents left. They're both women. Out of the 2 or 3 covens are left, 2 out of the 3 are women, as far as I know. But they tell you that men are all bad and men just want war. But who's pulling the strings at the top? Like everything else in this world, everything's backwards, everything's upside down. And that is one of the biggest. And it's time we all started coming together and working for each other. Getting back into some sort of balance where both aspects of the human being, which we all have male and female in us, is providing a balance to both. Where are we next? I listened to a recent programme on the Kingdom of Mana with great interest, but with not so great understanding. How can I learn more about this topic? Well, as it stands, there's a kind of smallish sized website because they're that busy with other things. But the main place you learn about the Kingdom of Mana as it stands currently is this show. So you've got questions about the Kingdom of Mana, I'm in contact with them regularly. Maybe one day we will have the head of Kingdom of Mana on the show when certain things are completed or have died down, and the threats and all the other nonsense. There's a lot of meetings with high level, in inverted commas, people at the moment. All of them have to come to the Kingdom of Mana people to discuss things. They have no option anymore. They have to go through the Kingdom of Mana. Because as it stands, none of them have got anything anymore. Selling our souls. No, not selling bosoms, our souls. I covered that earlier. Miss Mana made the statement in Tuesday's show that there are no co-creators, just a creator. I know that she was speaking in the context of the Elite, but since I came up the pike with the concept from Edgar Casey that we're all co-creators, and Levershoff sure seems to be creating things in his biography, can you reconcile that statement for me? Us, you kind of took it a bit too literal. There is an entity that was called L, who thinks that they are a co-creator with Source. Mr. Lucifer or Mrs. Lucifer, as there's some element of debate whether the real name is Luciferia, and Lucifer is female. Time will tell on that. I don't know definitively either way, but there's quite a few who have the backstory who believe it's Luciferia. So that entity, male or female, thinks that they're a co-creator with Source, and so they can collect all the souls and do what the hell they like. That entity is going to find out the hard way. Like all the others, that entity will disappear into the ether. Is the IMF threat to move to China a fluke or something real, and how does that change things or will be done going forward? The IMF is an illusion as it stands. It has no sovereignty. It was part of the World Bank and the rest of the bullshittery. And as the trusts have been taken over, they don't even have call on that anymore. So the IMF is an illusion, and the move to China was all the rage in 2013, funny enough. Maybe it's part of the loop again. IMF may continue in a different format, repurposed, I don't know at this point. But that smacks of a 4-year loop story. Miss Mana stated there are 8 billion people. Could you elaborate on that, since the theory is a lot less than a given number? That's her belief and opinion. Given she has access to certain things a lot more than I do, then my theory is that it's a lot lower. Certainly given what's taken place around the world. China, one-child policy, 27,000 children die each day from disease or malnutrition. Then you've got all the wars that's gone on over the last 60, 70 years. And the famines and all kinds of natural disasters and unnatural disasters and false flags. And a collapse in the birth rate in the Western world to boot. There used to be 2.3 children in the Western world. It's now down to 1.2. To keep the pension system going, they need 2.3. That's why they brought in Mexicans and Puerto Ricans into America, and let in Romanians and every other nation into Britain, because they have more children to prop the system up. So time will tell. But I don't mind being wrong. You know me. If I am wrong, I'll hold my hand up. But I just struggling to see how the population of the last 50 years has doubled, given all that death and destruction. Can you elaborate Miss Manner's comments about God, source, creator? I don't know what you wish me to elaborate on. Basically, she used those three terms because different people use those terms. If you're religious, people want to call it God. If you are not religious, you might want to call it source or creator. So it was given the benefit to all people. How are the warrior and the fifth element identified? Good question. I would suggest it's to do with the resonance and frequency, possible DNA also. All of us that come in here have certain frequencies and codes that are known as the individual comes in. Some people become targeted from a young age, right through their lives, till you are eventually steered off your path or removed altogether from your path. But some people will also come in here with a purpose and a mission. It may take them in their teens to remember. It could take until the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, or even in the 60s to remember what you came in for. There's lots of different entities and people from different places and star systems and even different universes in here to fix this nonsense. Because once this is fixed, with Earth being the nexus planet, it has a roll-on, knock-on effect that will ripple right through the universe. So that's, if I can get if there's a more definitive answer to that question, I will ask. But I think that's basically the gist of it. It's to do with the frequency and the DNA of certain individuals that people resonate out. And don't ask me who they are, because I don't know. Is there anything being done behind the scenes to expose the vaccine agenda? Well, there's enough being done not behind the scenes. The people have spoken, and more countries are becoming, and people are aware and just saying, you know what, we're not having your vaccines. And that's largely been people driven. It's like Monsanto was banned in 16, 17 countries, it might be more now. Who did that? The people did. And yet the people still think they have no power. It's the illusion again, and the limitation again. But yes, there is certain things that are going on behind the scenes on 479 different aspects of human life currently. And one day, 2 weeks will be correct. I know we're all tired, but none more than the people who are doing the stuff. Someone that I know involved with the Kingdom of Mana are operating 18, 19, 20 hours a day because of the different time zones. Got to be on the ball. Right, where are we next? Next question. I think I've covered all that. I don't want to really discuss old tellers again. Was there a couple of questions on the thingy? Vaccines. You mentioned there was something about there could be a problem using crystals. I have a lot of them. I thought if you used them with good intent they could be beneficial. Is that not the case? It depends on who used them prior. And do you have the ability to clear them before your intent takes over? This is kind of things that get overlooked in many aspects. I know one of the particular member of Cosmic Voice had a plethora of trinkets and crystals and stones from all kinds of places all over the world. And he was constantly being attacked. And they were the source. Because people apply their intent. You're assuming that the person you've bought that item off is, like yourself, good intent. What if they're dark energy? And then you buy that item off that person that's latent with dark energy. Cobra people sent me one of those Sintamani stones, or whatever, however way you pronounce it. It's got too many M's and I's and N's. It sat there in the packet for a month until I thought it was ready to be opened. Did I detect anything of it? Whereas people, oh, me stones have arrived, out they go, it goes into the hand, and you've just grabbed hold of it. And a potential negative entity or life force around that stone. This is the problem with the stone in the Mecca. That's come from Sirius B. Those entities from that particular planet have not done any favours to humanity on this. Far from it. Nasty, nasty entities. Sirius B. And yet you've got 2 billion Muslims doing the loop round it. Hello? So it's something that some of the New Age people won't tell you about the frequency and the person who had it before you, or the people who had it before you. That has to be cleared before you can then put your intent on it. Think of the crystal stones, the crystal skulls. People just think, oh, we'll get loads of information. But what if the dark have had hold of it for 13,000 years? And then we start handling it. It's kind of a hidden science. But anything you receive from somebody else, you know, people often go to car boot sales and buy used goods. What if the person who used that was a rapist or a homicidal maniac or a serial killer or a wife abuser? Violence all around, energy all around the object. It travels. So I hope that gives you a better understanding. Just be careful. Good night, Holly. Holly's flagging. I think that's the last question. Probably should be 2 3/4 hours. I think that's enough after two full-on shows this week. I hope you all enjoyed the Sunday show as well. Forgot to mention that Willow Niitsuma. I thought that was fascinating. Trips to Peru and how she took personal responsibility for herself to correct certain ways and thoughts and processes that made her up who and what she was then. She didn't like it and chose to go on a personal journey to correct it. And if everyone did that, then suddenly we've got a better planet overnight. Part of the problem is we lie too much to ourselves. Way too much. We put out a facade to people that we're this or that, when in reality we're the opposite. Why lie? Where does it get you? Like the story before of how many women I'd slept with. It would have been convenient to fit in with the narrative and go, yeah, I slept with all kinds, me. But it's not the truth, is it? And if we're seeking the truth and the all-knowing outside of ourselves, we have to also expose the untruths of ourselves also. And this is why more and more people are not being themselves, because the masks are coming down, the masks of illusion. This was put forward last year. I think people are seeing those masks coming down more and more. People are exposing themselves for their worst elements that remained hidden. Alfred Weber today admits he's got a 38% stake in Gaiam TV. Oops. And then you get people, sadly we lost today, Jim Marrs, who tried to get the truth out to the best of his ability in a manner befitting of the man. Didn't force it down people's throats. Kind, gentle. That's a man who's in balance with both sides. Didn't do a Corey Good and try to ram it down people's throats and tell them they're basically effing idiots if you don't believe it. He didn't hide behind his story like Mr. Wilcock does. No. So Mr. Marrs is a big loss. But the important thing is we carry on his legacy of delivering the truth to the best of our abilities. I'll go out and honour Mr. Marrs and do that. So I hope you all enjoyed the show. That's 3 down, 1 to go this week. Who's next? Eric Lewis, one of the members from THI and MeWe. He'll be on next with his particular journey and story. I'm not going to give any of it away because it'll all be revealed on the Sunday. And then next week we've only got 2 shows. So it'll be the Thursday show, and next Sunday, the week after, there is no evening with Thomas, because Thomas will be on with the OYM lads on their radio channel on 2 p.m. Eastern time, I think. So that's a week on Sunday. And I would expect there'll be another fairly largish show, at least one, before the end of this month as well. So, lots to look forward to, lots more work for me. People often ask me, what can I do to help? The best answer is, fix yourselves. Stay in balance. Stop being nasty to others. And live in harmony. Then we can change anything we want. Right. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show, and hope Chris Whalen, a member from THI, gets the operation to repair the hip goes well. And also want the members on the chat to give a big hug and love and kisses to